It is just past dawn, and the last ordinary sound you will ever hear is a church bell. You are standing in a village on the coast. The mist is still on the water. Somewhere a child is crying, a cow is complaining, a fire is being lit. This is a normal morning, and then the boats come out of the fog, low and fast and silent. Within an hour, everything you have ever known is gone. Your home is burning, your neighbors are dead, and you are alive. But here is the part almost every movie gets wrong. You think the Vikings came for gold. You think they came for treasure, silver chalices, jeweled crosses, chests of coins. That is what the history books show you. That is what the documentaries tell you. But a 2020 study by archaeologist Søren Sindbæk at Aarhus University mapped the trading networks of the Viking Age using trace element analysis. And what he found changes the picture completely. The most valuable cargo a longboat could carry home was not silver. It was you. The Vikings did not raid for treasure. They raided for people. It sounds strange at first, but the data is overwhelming. A captured human being was worth more than cattle, more than gold, because a person could work, a person could be sold, and a person could be sold again. The Old Norse word for what you have just become is thrall. It does not mean prisoner, it means living property. And an entire economic system was built around moving you from one owner to the next. The archaeologist Neil Price at Uppsala University has spent decades studying Viking warfare and its aftermath. He describes the slave economy as the hidden engine of the Viking Age. In his 2020 book, The Children of Ash and Elm, he writes that the slave trade was not a side effect of Viking raids. It was the central motivation. The treasure you see in museums was not the goal. It was the byproduct. The goal was people. And now your fate splits into 3 roads. Which one you walk depends entirely on luck. The first road is ransom. If you came from a family with any money at all, or a church or a lord who valued you, the Vikings would happily hand you back for the right price. To them, this was simply good business. There is a real account of a bishop named Rimbert, who walked through a Viking trading port and saw a long line of captured Christians being led away in chains. Among them was a woman, and to prove who she was, she began to sing. She sang the Psalms of a nun, over and over, until the bishop heard her, understood, and traded his own horse to buy her freedom. 1 horse. That was the price of your life on a good day. But most people had no bishop. Most people had no one coming. So for most, the road forked somewhere darker. The second road is a long one. You are not killed and you are not ransomed. You are sold. And this is where the scale of it becomes almost impossible to imagine. You are not sold once. You are carried into a trading network that stretched across the entire known world. Picture the distance. A farmer taken from the green coast of Ireland could be marched onto a boat, sold in Dublin, shipped to a market in Scandinavia, then traded down the great rivers of Russia, passed from hand to hand, until you are standing in a market in Baghdad, thousands of miles from the church bell you heard that morning, listening to a language you have never heard, owned by a man whose face you cannot read. How many hands would you pass through? Sometimes a dozen, sometimes more. The journey could take years. We know this network was real because the people who profited from it kept records. And because the archaeology is right there in the ground. In the old Viking trading towns, in Dublin, in Birka, in Hedeby, archaeologists have pulled iron from the soil that tells the whole story without a single word. Chains, neck shackles, collars sized for a human throat. These were not decorations. They were the tools of moving people who did not want to be moved. An entire industry was built around the thing that had just happened to you. The third road is the one you live if you are kept. Say the boat that took you sails home, and you are not sold onward. You arrive at a farm in a cold country, and you are now the one who does the work no one else will do. You haul the water, you spread the manure, you grind the grain until your hands crack in the dark before anyone else wakes. You sleep with the animals. You eat what is left. You have no name in the law. A thrall could be bought, sold, given away, or punished, and the law of the land would not so much as turn its head. And yet, this is the part that complicates everything. Your life now depended almost entirely on one thing you could not choose. Your owner, a researcher named Kjellström at Stockholm University, studied the skeletal remains of people believed to be Viking thralls. Her analysis, published in 2012, found clear markers of extreme physical strain, spinal degeneration, joint damage, healed fractures from violence. These were bodies that had been worked hard and punished often. This was a world that could be unspeakably brutal to the people at the bottom of it, but land a different owner and a door opened, because some masters, for reasons of profit or conscience, allowed a thrall to work their way out. There is a record of a Viking chieftain named Erling, who ran his farm like a strange kind of bank. He set each thrall a task. Finish it, and any extra work you did, you kept. Save enough, and you could buy your own freedom in a year, maybe 2. Then he would use your payment to buy your replacement and help you start a life of your own as a free fisherman or farmer. Even at the very bottom, there was sometimes a thread leading up, slim, cruel in its own way, but real. And then there is the last road, the darkest one, the one that shows you exactly how this world saw a human life. When a powerful Viking died, he did not always go into the ground alone. Our clearest window into this comes from a man who was not a Viking at all. His name was Ibn Fadlan, an Arab diplomat who, more than 1,000 years ago, traveled north and met a band of Norse traders along a river. He described the great ship pulled ashore, the treasures laid out, and he described how, when a great man died, one of his thralls would be chosen to go with him into the next world, to serve him there as they had served him here. Ibn Fadlan watched it happen. He wrote it down. And because he did, we know that to these people, you were not only labor in life, you could be possessions carried into death. Sit with that for a moment. The person sleeping in the cold beside the animals was, in the end, counted among a rich man's belongings. So now go back to that morning. Go back to the church bell and the mist and the boats in the fog. You assumed, like everyone does, that the worst thing that could happen in a Viking raid was to die on the beach. But you have walked the other road now. You have seen the market, the chains, the rivers, the long years, the farm, the funeral. And you understand the thing the history books rarely say out loud. For the prisoners, death on the beach was the quick ending. The survivors got the long one. The Vikings did not end your story. They sold it, traded it, worked it, and sometimes buried it with someone else. And here is the mirror you were not expecting. You have never set foot on a Viking longboat. You have never worn a thrall's collar, but you live in a world where human value is still calculated by the same cold math. Every time you scroll past a headline about modern slavery, every time you hear a number attached to a refugee crisis, every time you reduce a stranger to their utility, you are standing on the same shoreline. The boats look different now, but the engine that drives them is older than you think. The researchers call it the slave economy of the Viking Age. But the truth is simpler. It is a story about what happens when one person decides another person is worth more as property than as a human. That story did not end when the last longboat rotted into the sea. It just changed its shape. It is just past dawn, and somewhere a church bell is ringing. And for the people who heard it, being spared was never the same thing as being saved. For you, the question is different. You were not on that beach, but the same world that built those boats is still building new ones. The question is whether you recognize the shape of the hull,